Hi everyone, I'm T.J. Alds of I-45 Now, and welcome to the Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce's as well as I-45's Now election forum. And we have several things we're going to be talking about tonight. This is part one, in which we're talking about the Santa Fe ISD bond proposition that's on the ballot here. And joining us is the Superintendent from Santa Fe ISD, Dr. Bott. And thanks for coming on. And forgive me, you and I have been playing phone tag for a little bit over a year to try to actually meet one-on-one. Let me just ask you, as this goes forward to the voters here, tell them what's on the ballot, because language can get confusing. People will see that language on the ballot and say, what the heck is this? So can you simplify that for us here so folks can understand?
I can, but first things first, I do want to say thanks to Gina for putting this together. Gina Booby, I appreciate you guys, appreciate the chamber. I want to thank Mr. Alls for being here and doing the questioning, and I want to thank Pastor Drake for loaning the church facility to us. We sure do appreciate you. And I guess this would be a good time to remind y'all, this is a church. You know, it's a place of worship, so, you know, be nice and don't throw stuff or whatever. No, I do think that, for those of you that don't know, we had a bond referendum on the table this past November, and it did not pass. And so what we did was, after that bond not passed, we went to work and we started visiting with our community, we started visiting with parents, and we started visiting our stakeholders to say, okay, we want to make sure we do this next bond the right way, and we want this to be a community-driven bond. What do we need to do? What are we missing? What do we need to hear? And there were three really big things that we heard from our voters and from our stakeholders. And the first one was, we really didn't want to pay any more taxes. We felt like that price point was too high and that it wasn't necessary. The second one was that they didn't want to build a new school until they started to really see the homes being built and saw those students come in. And the third one was that they didn't feel like a lot of people just didn't trust the school district. And so this bond package was developed specifically to address those three things that we felt the voice of our community was saying. And this bond package does not increase the tax rate. It is not asking ultimately for new school buildings. We're looking at facilities to improve our career and technical education, our job skills training. And throughout this process, we've invited our community to come and be a part of the committee as well as the bond oversight committee, because we want to be as transparent as we can be throughout this process, and we want to build trust with our community. As far as the actual details of the bond package, are you okay showing the video? Because the video really does, that kind of describes it.
We'll get the video at the end here for everyone to see. But for the forum portion of things here, you brought up a good portion of that. First, let's just go ahead and get the dollar amount that folks are voting on here so they understand that right off the bat.
So the dollar amount is $39 million. $28 million is to expand our career and technical education. The other $11 million is for capital projects that are going to address safety and security and infrastructure. Those are the two main things. And so the committee, through the process, said this is what we feel like our students need and our community needs. There's nothing on the ballot that's athletic or aesthetic or cosmetic. These were things that the committee felt like were genuine needs. And again, able to do this in a way where we're not increasing the tax rate was very much at the request of our voters. We
hear that a lot about not increasing the tax rate, or, oh, it's only a few dollars more, or the like. How is it you're able to say, because the language will get confusing, because technically it's going to be an increase on one side of the tax rate because it's a two-part. Sometimes that's language and it'll go in there. How did you avoid that this time so that folks can understand when they vote, if they see language that may confuse them?
Great question. And so there's not an increase on either side, the maintenance and operations or the interest and sinking. And a school district ultimately has an interest and sinking debt, their tax rate, and then they have a maintenance and operations tax rate. Our interest and sinking tax rate allows us to pay our debt or pay down our debt over time. So much like someone in this room who has credit card debt, if you were to refinance credit card debt or refinance your home, in order for a district to restructure its debt, we have to get permission from the voters. So if we're to take on new debt, but manage it in a way where we're not asking voters for any new money or them to pay any additional money, we can do that without increasing our tax rate. And the way we do that is because we've been financially sound for the past few years, and we have the ability, just like if you set $100 a month aside to pay debt, but you maybe only want to pay $50 a month, if you needed that new fridge or something else you were trying to get for your home, you could maybe start paying $60 a month but you're not exceeding your budget. The school district has a budget, just like every school district does, to pay down debt, and we have managed that well. And at the request of our voters and our constituents, we want to make sure that we're complying with that committee and that voice to move forward with things we feel like the community is saying they want for our students, but not increasing the tax rate.
Right, and that's the important part of this, the rate. But then again, too, you're going to have those that come back, and I'm sure you heard this as you were planning on this, is, well, yeah, but my taxes still be higher. That's the appraisal side of things. Has there been any consideration of making sure when this is all said and done that it does kind of keep not only the rate down, but that overall tax bill in check? Not increase it, but maybe keep it in check.
So that's what this is doing. Whether if the bond passes, your tax rate is going to be $1.23. If the bond does not pass, your tax rate is $1.23. We have the way we have organized our debt in such a way is going to allow us to finance a bond. If we passes it, then that tax rate remains the same. If it doesn't, that's still the way we have our debt structure. We're still paying down existing debt, and we can do that because we're financially sound. Now, I'm glad you brought that up because there are a lot of school districts that are maxed out on their debt service, and they can't go out for a bond. If we want to do a $60 or $70 million bond, yes, we would have had to have increased the tax rate. So if you are a property owner and you find out that your home, the appraisal value went up, then that has nothing to do with us. Obviously, that's the appraisal district, but the tax rate that we are putting out there over the past 7 years has just continued to lower. And as more people move to Santa Fe, that's our attempt, is to continue to lower that tax rate. But as it stands now, managing our debt service and keeping that tax rate the same is in response to our voters. They're not wanting an increase at all.
Right, and when you say managing the debt service, people will hear those terms and like, well, what does that really mean? Is it a simple way of saying this is like if you go in to refinance your home to take advantage of lower rates and bringing it down? You've been able to take whatever existing debt, you're going to be able to come in there, you've paid off debt, you've got some room in there, and that's been able how this works out in the financial.
Correct. The difference is we have to ask permission from our voters in order to do that.
Yeah, no, anytime that you're going to go ahead and issue bonds, you've got to get the voters'
permission. But in a home, if you're refinancing debt, you just have to ask your spouse.
Yeah. Well, no, that's a great example.
At least I do.
That's a great example. So anyone here has your wife when you have to get something done, now you know how to, or more importantly, you have to ask your husband sometimes to how to do it too. Either way, it works that way. Now, yes, no tax rate increase now. That will happen. But this doesn't prevent down the line the school board saying, well, we need this now, we need this now, this now. Because there'll be voters who come back and say, wait, you promised us no tax rate increase. Then they may come back for something again. So let me ask you, because you just had the failed bond proposal in November. Now you're coming back with this one in May. And I'm going to get into how that came about. You explained some of it before. But folks are always leery when they hear government saying, we're not going to raise your taxes, or we're not going to raise your tax rate and the like. What assurances do you have to them that this is going to sustain for a while, and they're not in a year or 2 or 3 years all of a sudden going to have another bond proposition coming down the line where they've got to vote on that?
Well, 2 reasons. Number one, as a representative of the school district and as a superintendent, I'm not permitted to tell people to vote yes or no, and I'm not permitted to actually legally say that the tax rate's going to stay.
Well, I'm not asking you to say yes or no, but what guarantees can you give them that there's not going to be something on the ballot again in 3 years?
Well, we don't know that. That's something that's where the community comes in. This bond was a community-driven bond, and so our goal is to stay in touch with our voters, stay in touch with the people of Santa Fe, and if they're coming to us and saying, okay, things are growing, or we need help, or we need to look at some of these areas, that's when we want to make sure we're listening. And so for us to say this was a community-driven bond package and a community-driven bond committee, that wasn't just a series of meetings. It was started the day after the bond had not passed. We're trying to make sure that this isn't just about a bond. This is about us connecting with our community, listening to our community. And so, no, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're turning around 3 years or 5 years or 7 years and looking at the bond. That's something the community needs to ultimately partner with us and do. It's not something we just come back and say, hey, we want to do this. And that's not what this was either.
But based on the growth, what you had said before is no athletic facilities, no new schools until we see the houses going up and the like.
That was the request this past
from the community, right. And so you're trying to address that in this. But where do you see, based on what you're seeing on growth within the school district, population growth and the like, get your crystal ball out and look down the line of when do you think maybe those things come along, so people can kind of understand.
I will get a little bit of a crystal ball out with the understanding, and for everyone in this room and everyone watching, that what I'm fixing to talk about has nothing to do with this current bond. The bond that we are talking about today has everything to do with our students now, and what the community and the committee has said that were needs of our students now. But to entertain you, I'll go ahead and do the crystal ball thing. Yes, there are more homes being built, and you can see more homes being built. And so when we feel like we're watching the student population in our facilities grow to the point where it's not something that is as manageable as it needs to be, that's where we start talking to the community and bring our community on board and saying, okay, here's what we're looking at. We need your opinion. We need your take. Come walk through our schools, and we start looking at those things. But for me to give you a definitive answer about what's going to happen in 3 years or 5 years, I don't think anybody can do it. Well, maybe Pastor Drake can. I don't know. He might be the one to do. No, he's shaking his head too. So no. Best I could do for you.
You point out that the first meeting was had like right after the November proposition failed. How many of that, so folks can have a better understanding of this? One of the things I understand is you brought in folks that were vocal opponents or on the fence maybe before and went ahead and voted no. Did you bring those folks? How many of those folks, actually, I should say, I know you brought some to the table. How many of those folks, because people hear all the time, well, the community decided this, but they'll say, well, I wasn't asked, and we hear that. So explain that to folks that may have still some doubts.
So ultimately, talking about a bond isn't our full-time job, and contrary to popular belief, school districts don't wake up and say, hey, I really want to talk about a bond today. We're letting our community and our parents drive this, but our primary job is running the school district and making sure our kids get the best education they can. So with the time that we had, we were making phone calls to people that either told us they voted no, or other folks had told us had voted no and willing to call. And I think I probably called 70 or 80 people, like called, and some hung up and weren't real nice, and I did get a little bit of profanity, but some people were like, hey, thanks, I didn't expect you to call. And they started to engage with us. So of the 70 or 80 I called, about half of that committed to actually joining it. And so what I told the school board was 2/3 of the Santa Fe community voted no in this last election. So 2/3 of this next committee needs to be people that voted no. And so that committee ultimately was designed to represent the community. And we didn't ask any questions or try to dictate the direction that should go. Those meetings were a result of conversations that have been happening over a period of months, and people had said, hey, we feel like our kids need this, but we don't feel like we need this right now, and no matter what, we do not want to see a tax rate increase. And so whether the CAD appraisal value goes up or whatever, again, completely beyond our control, we wanted to make sure our tax rate remained the same. And down the road, as more people do move to Santa Fe, our goal would be to reduce the tax rate. So if we did have to come back in 5 years or 7 years or whatever, in theory, we'd be able to come back with another bond that didn't increase the tax rate. That's always the goal. And I feel like in Santa Fe, we have a strong chance of being able to do that. Can I guarantee that? No. But the goal is never to raise the tax rate unless it's absolutely necessary. And another misconception is that when property taxes go up and the school district gets more money from that, people think we get more revenue. We actually don't. When property taxes go up and the school district get more property taxes, the state just sends us less money. So we get the same amount no matter what.
Right, and it's kind of based on the student population and how you're paid. And that is the other thing, is that kind of, they think there's that golden bag at the end of the rainbow that goes in there, and really the state controls what your funding is going to be.
They do, and we've called our legislature before and tried to talk about this funding issue, and most of the time it's either a hang up or, thank you for playing, you are the weakest link, goodbye. They're not really interested in talking to us about it.
Right. Now let's go ahead and get in the nuts and bolts, the fun part of this, I guess, if this were to pass. A lot of this and the technical side of things and college preparedness that you're going to have. Talk about what it's going to specifically pay for.
So what our bond steering committee did, and this was a series, I'm probably going to bring our executive director of career and technical education, because she's really awesome and I just want to give her a chance to talk, and it shouldn't just be about me talking. But we ultimately brought her on board because she's done that before. We could
come on over.
We could share a seat, or you could share. I mean, wouldn't be too awkward, but we wanted to make sure we were visiting with businesses and parents and community members during this process before, to also specifically talk about CT. So we had CT roundtables and we had community roundtables designed to talk about what we believed was the direction of Santa Fe and what our families and businesses were saying that they felt was a priority. And Ms. Dillon kind of took the reins on that, and we partnered together to do that part and do the capital projects part and hear the voice of our community. So I do want to give her a chance to
let's go ahead. She's the one that had to take care of all the real hard work, right? I mean, that's it. I mean, the real heavy lifting was done by you here on this. Because one of the things is, when we talk about CTE in here, the career and technical facilities to improve those, what specifically can folks understand, if this passes, where those funds are going to go and how they're going to be used?
So with the help of our community, we've had several meetings. We did a survey of our community with over 1,200 people responding. About half of those were students, where we have student interest. Parents had that chance to get the input, and we looked at programs and really created our priorities for the next 10 years. We know the costs of everything is increasing. We know where in 10 years what we want to have based on what our community needs. As of now, we're not set in stone because obviously needs may change over the next few years, but we are looking at hoping to expand our health science program, which is our biggest priority, one of our largest priorities. We have a program, a very strong program, with students becoming industry certified each year. So we need to grow that. We have our culinary arts program. We know the Gulf Coast is a tourist, a place where tourism is growing more and more. So we need to build our facilities so that they are matching more of the tourism need rather than the old style, just family services, the family and consumer science, homemaking type classes. We know we have a big gap. Our community, two of our largest areas are looking for either an automotive or diesel type program. What that is really targeted also by our local labor market, Workforce Development Board. We are also going to be we're missing a welding program. We send students to College of the Mainland, and we try to partner as much as we can, but it's difficult for students to take that much time out of their day to travel back and forth. And so that is another thing that came out in our survey, that our parents really want to be able to serve the kids on our campuses. Our ag welding programs, that is one of our fastest growing programs because we are a rural community, but it's also a huge leadership group. And so even within that program, we see a lot of need for growth.
And should point out that ag welding program, if you haven't, it starts next week, the Galveston County Fair and Rodeo.
Yes.
Each year, the students from Santa Fe dominate out there to begin with. But it is, and folks will think about, oh, okay, so you can weld a tractor together. It's way more than that, actually, and there are so many careers on that side of things that folks may not be aware of. And I just wanted to give some brag because I've actually bought one of the pieces myself from those students that did a great job out there. And let me let you continue on, but let me ask you on the welding program as well. Obviously, we saw Texas City adopted,
Yes.
where they had Sean Trader has their large welding program there.
Yes.
College of the Mainland has a very strong one as well, and that's where you've been sending the students. How much of a demand do you think you're going to have from the student population for that when you get going?
So the demand for students sending them to College of the Mainland is very small. But based on our survey, it was one of our top where students have that interest. The advantage to the ag structures, they learn not just welding skills, but they also learn a lot of the mechanical skills. They get kind of a broad array of skills that can prepare them to go into many of the different construction and other types of careers around this area. But welding is very intense, and they're learning every type of welding in a welding class. And so it was one of the areas that had the most interest. But again, when it comes time to have to go out to COM, to find the room in their schedule, to do those types of things, we don't.
It becomes more of a hassle, and so you expect an increase here just based on having it homegrown at that point.
And not just hassle, but it's also a lot more expensive. Next year, we do plan to start transporting our students out there so we can hopefully have more students become part of the COM program until we get our own facility built. But there's also the tuition expense. There's a lot of extra supplies and fees that we have to pay to COM. And so there are other reasons why having it on our campus will save the district money in the long run.
What else within CTE are you trying to make some expansion on programs?
So our audio video production, digital communications, we just finished building one lab that has the Mac computers in there for the students to learn their design on. But our audio video, we need some expansion in that, and hopefully, have that opportunity of working with Bob in our construction department with a new scoreboard, hopefully, getting some hands-on with them. We're also looking at just general construction, just learning some of each of the trades within the area and needing the facility to be able to do that.
I bet one of the things that there was a time that we saw education all across this nation would get away from the trades. And it would go into, not knocking this, hey, make sure you take your sciences, make sure you take your maths, make sure you're taking geometry, but the trades weren't as emphasized as much. And we're seeing this trend, one, thanks to the state changing the law some years ago where we
Yes.
read those lanes in which technical vocation came in there. But there actually really is a more high demand now of getting that training, getting some type of certification and the like, right?
Back in the day, the late 80s, 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't a whole lot of demand. The labor market was pretty saturated. Graduating a few students from programs here, there, and everywhere was filling that need. But around the turn of the century into 2000s, they started realizing that the baby boomer population was becoming eligible for retirement, and all of a sudden we had built all our schools without the facilities simply because there wasn't a demand at the time. Now, even that fourth math, we're still emphasizing 4 maths, 4 science. Get in as much as you can, but we are customizing them to our CTE programs. So there is the advanced animal science for the students looking in those areas. There is a food science that gives them the science behind everything. So we're actually being able to add more academic classes directly connected to those career tech programs. So they're not just out taking a random course that they don't connect to what they want to do next.
And it's exciting. I know just personal perspective of seeing these students who may have otherwise struggled to go on to the secondary education and the like have found something they have a passion for, and that's a great part about CTE.
Yes.
And some bias here. I'm looking forward to see how good these videographers are. They come out of there, and also too, as anyone who can tell, looking at me right here, I have sampled some of the culinary students' work. We've actually, it was surprising some years ago at the Epicurean in Clear Lake, there was the Santa Fe High School culinary team up there, and it was like, whoa, I didn't even know it existed at the time.
Right.
And it was great to see that expand out. It kind of changes some perceptions of some folks out there.
Yes, we have, our students are doing amazing things. Even with our FFA team, it's almost impossible to get out of Area 3 because it's so large. And we have our livestock judging team going to a state competition, and that's one of the first in a very long time. So there's a lot of great things that are going on. We're really focusing in. Said we want to do short-term improvements within that list of priorities, things that are going to improve what our students are able to work with today. And the bond is something that down the road, as we're growing, we want to improve.
So with this bond, it's not about building new facilities, it's taking advantage of what you already have in existing and upgrading that, right?
It is, there may be some new facilities. What we want to do is once we have the money in hand, we want to work with our architects, find the best way to use those funds, the most efficient way. So if the most efficient way is going to be an add-on section, then we can add on.
And I should correct myself. I say facilities, but when I say that, I'm meaning more campuses than that. But this is about an add-on somewhere or the like.
Absolutely, and it may be just some of the renovations. Some of our facilities are nice, they have the space, but they were built for infrastructure in 2000, and in 2022, there's a lot new equipment, a lot more fiber optics, a lot more cabling, a lot more things that are needed to run the equipment that we have today.
The big thing that comes in with any of this, even in welding, technology is changing. I've worn the helmet that has basically, like a front screen that shows me where my target is stuff. The technology in that is changing. So for folks that are considering voting for this, what can we assure them that the equipment, the technology that's brought in is something that's not going to be outdated just within a few years? Because that's a big thing in the times.
Well, we depend on our business partners when we look at not just what equipment are we going to purchase, but also how are we going to build this facility. And we count on them to be looking, 10 years down the road to see these are things we're going to need. This is something new. So yeah, we may not have it yet, but let's build the infrastructure so we're able to expand. And that's another thing that we do is look at what, we know everything's going to change. Technology is going to bring in a lot. So we add in the capacity to expand, whether it's electrical or with the other, it's built in a way that expansion is possible. Whereas where we are now, we're pretty maxed out on our electrical in those ag labs. We can't add any more equipment. It's just kind of done without any major architectural changes.
And that's one of the advancements as well. The technology is it's more modular than it was when a lot of these facilities were even built, if you even say even 2000. 2000s that were along the way there. Anything else within the CTE that you wanted to address here?
We have the list that's back in the back, and I think everybody was able to pick it up, that shows what our priorities are, but I think those are a lot of our high spots.
Gotcha. Another issue on that is coming on, and I don't know if this is going to be you or Dr. Bott here, the security and safety projects. Always when we're talking security at Santa Fe ISD, it's a big thing in safety. Do you want to address that, or is that something you turn over there?
So again, we're going back to that last bond election that did not pass. We wanted to bring a list of capital projects to that committee, and so I want to say we brought 20, 25 million, somewhere in there, of capital projects, and we essentially let the community prioritize that, and they told us the learning environment was what mattered the most, and they wanted to focus on that. And so what you're seeing on that list of capital projects, those of you in the audience have that, but it's also accessible online, SantaFeISDbond.com. That list is geared specifically towards upgrading any safety and security measures and needed infrastructure. According to what that committee was looking at, they were saying, yes, we do want to upgrade this side of the junior high. We want to make sure we have a generator in case the power goes out. There's things they wanted to see in our schools, and there were dozens of other things that they just took off the table because we wanted to make sure we were focusing on what, from their perspective, was an absolute need.
And I wonder on this process, I mean, a lot of times, particularly if you've had a failed proposition go on the ballot, it can be easy to say, well, we're just going to try again and try these maneuvers. Y'all genuinely, and I say y'all, not to push a yes or a no here, although I think, we know you would be in favor of it. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I am. But it is that there was an assertive effort to actually go and find folks who said, you know what, I didn't support it last time, and this is what I need, to actually listen to the folks that may have been on the other side, but have the same goals. Do you think that was a rewarding process to where folks that may not have been as vocal about things within the district before on things, except to say no, that maybe you have some folks that have more buy-in from this point forward on anything, not just this?
And that's really the goal. Like I said before, the goal isn't the bond. The goal is to create a partnership. We want our parents to feel like they can come and talk to us, to the extent where we want them to be able to even make a phone call to the school and hear a smile over the phone. But that partnership is the ultimate goal here, not just in connection with making sure our kids are successful, but making sure we're building trust with our community.
Thank you. Again, early voting starts Monday out there. What's this process been like? I mean, you talk about trial by fire. You come in and you got to get ready for things when you come in to take over as superintendent at Santa Fe ISD, the new job. And they say, oh, by the way, here you go. We're going to hand you a bond issue right off the bat that you had to go through, and then you get ready for this.
No matter what you hear or what people say or what's out there on social media, I can testify, and my wife will tell you I'm as honest and candid as you can find. I have the best job in the world because every day I come to work, I work with great people, and we get to help kids. That's what this is about. There's not some political agenda here. We just want to help our kids, and it's fun. And yeah, the people that we got to meet that said no when they hung up on us, that wasn't fun. But the ones that actually came in and really wanted to partner with us, it is fun to do that. But building partnerships is fun. If I may, just one last thing. I want to make sure I put this important fact out there. And this is easily our biggest challenge. There's hundreds of bonds in Texas that are probably going to be on the table. There's only a small handful that are no tax rate increase bonds. Years ago, I want to say probably 13, 14 years ago, there was some legislation put in place in response to a very, very small number of poorly managed districts, and the legislation managed to get through where any school bond referendum has to have that language. This is a tax rate increase.
Right. That's what I was talking about at the beginning. It has to be there. Right.
Even though many of the bonds are not a tax rate increase. And that was a result of legislation that ultimately was not clear and did not apply to every other school district. So you may or may not have seen legislation in the past. It's not always accurate. That's the case here. So I can say in actuality and in fact, this is not a tax rate increase. And if it says that on the ballot, that is not a representation of what the truth is for Santa Fe.
Right. And the legislation was supposed to say a tax increase because that's what it takes in both accounts, appraisals and the rate. But again, it does get confusing. But again, it says it on the website, but I'm just sure this passes. No rate hike going up.
But that is our biggest challenge.
Yeah, that is the one. And that's why we're trying to address that at the front. Get it out there. Just deal with it up front. Thank y'all both for being on. I know you've got a video presentation you want to make to the crowd that's here for us.
It's 3 minutes.
Yeah, we're going to duck out from our broadcast here and let you make that presentation to folks. So let me give you a second here so you can explain what's coming up. I'm TJ Alt.